Woof.
Okay. Our speaker tonight is Dr. James Adams, and his talk is titled The Underwing Moths, Catocala of Taylor's Ridge, Walker County, Georgia, and a nod to other locations in Georgia and nod to COVID-19. And we just heard maybe a nod to some Washington butterflies as well. Um, or alternatively, titled Gorgeous Nightflyers with a Surprising Superpower. Many of you know James from his active participation in our WBA meetings, even though he joins us from Georgia. He's a professor at Dalton State College, where he teaches ecology, evolution, entomology, and ethology. Since 2011, he has been editor of the periodical News of the Lepidopterous Society. Although he specializes in moths, mostly Noctuidae, he also has an interest in butterflies. So thank you for being with us tonight, James.
Always. I enjoy this group very much. And so thank you for asking me to come talk again. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in just a moment. I do want to say one thing. You noticed Paulette's alternative title. I told her to juice up the discussion of my talk however she wanted to. And so she's the one who added that, which made me in turn add a slide you will see shortly. So I just thought I'd let you in on that because it was kind of funny. So
Oh, you skunked me.
I did. You know me well enough. I'm gonna put you on the spot if that
Yeah, you
happens.
called it out.
Absolutely. So okay. All right. Tonight's talk is on underwing moths. Now, even if you are a butterfly person almost exclusively, chances are, if you live in the United States, you will have at least seen passing mention of the underwing moths. They are large, they are reasonably spectacular. They are typified and are called underwing moths by having four wings that are somewhat camouflagey or cryptically colored, and then some stark looking hind wings, either black like you see in this picture or red or orange as you will see in many of the other pictures. And so, speaking of the superpowers, I just mentioned the first two here. They will sit like what you saw in the first picture there when they are just simply sitting on the tree or wherever they are sitting. So they blend into the background. But if something touches them and they don't fly off immediately, they'll flash their hind wings, like again you saw in the second picture just a moment ago. So what I mean is they'll look like, if I can find my, they'll sit like this, but if they're touched just a little bit, they'll flash their hind wings like that. Now, if the predator isn't startled enough, it does cause the predators to hesitate. And if you've ever encountered these moths in nature, you know that when they are flying, they are super fast and incredibly erratic. So you can see why they would be able to evade practically anything that was after them. And as is true for many, many moths, they can also hear bats and therefore avoid them. And with their erratic flight, again, there are very few bats that will ever catch an underwing moth. And again, as I said, these are big, attractive, or big, obvious moths with a wingspan in most cases of something like 3 to 3.5 to 4 inches. So they can be really good size. If you want to encounter them, most of you are familiar with putting out lights to attract moths, and there are plenty that come to lights. I have found that, and so have many other people interested in underwings, that they come to bait on a regular basis. You probably are familiar with bait. For butterflies, the same kind of bait works for moths, where you mash up some fruit and some sugar, maybe a little bit of alcohol of some kind, and you slop it on a tree or put it in a bait trap or something like that. And the underwing moths come to that on a regular basis. And underwing moths really, really like it. So if it does have any alcohol content, they'll stay at the bait long enough. And I've actually seen drunk underwing moths in my lifetime. And if you wonder how you recognize a drunk underwing moth, you recognize it by the fact that as it's sitting on the side of the tree, it starts to sort of stumble down the tree trunk and then land on the ground and not be able to fly away. So moths can get drunk. Uh, and the other way to encounter them, though, and if you're out during the daytime as a butterflyer, if you're in the woods at all, um, since they are largely sitting on tree trunks during the daytime resting, if you're in a place where there's a good density of underwing moths, you can tap the trees. Even if you don't see the moths, they'll fly out, and although it's erratic and fast, you can follow them with your eyes, and they'll land on another tree. And so you can slowly but surely work your way up to the next tree and take pictures if you're interested. So those are the way to encounter them. Now, in Georgia, there are 67 species of underwings recorded, many of them from this spot. I'm going to show you where it is in just a second. It's called Taylor's Ridge. It is literally 30 minutes from my house. There are several hot spots in Georgia for a variety of different underwing moths, but this Taylor's Ridge spot may be the most diverse spot, not only in Georgia, but perhaps in the entire world, as I will talk about a little later. Now, I am going to show you a couple of other places, and I probably should go back and say, I mentioned that I'm giving a nod to some other Georgia locations and to COVID-19. Now, you may wonder why I'm saying something about COVID-19. Well, usually during the summer months, I will travel to the Lepidopterist Society meeting wherever it is, and that's often in June and July. Well, in 2020, during the pandemic, I didn't go anywhere but stayed around here. And so I got a chance to work on Taylor's Ridge a lot more during the months of June and July than I had for probably 15 years, because I'd been going to the Lepidopterist Society meeting every year. And so that year, 2020, gave me a chance to really investigate the entire diversity across the entire season, which on Taylor's Ridge runs from May all the way into early November. And so, and that year happened to be a really spectacular year for them as well. So that's one of those sort of fortunate happenstance events that we don't get very often in our lifetime. So it was kind of fun to be stuck at home and look at this diversity. So, all right. So Taylor's Ridge is way up here. There's another ridge line that I do some work on that's really close to my college, as you will see. But I'm going to start this by going to this location down here called Alligator Creek, over to Sapelo Island for just a second, and then back up here to Brasstown Bald for a single species. And then I'm going to focus in on Taylor's Ridge. So at Alligator Creek, that spot in middle southern Georgia, here's a list, and I realize this list probably doesn't mean too much to most people, which is fine. But the ones with asterisks are ones that are found only in South Georgia and not up in Northwest Georgia. Now, the rest of them you can find up here where I am. But here are some of the species that are more or less unique to the sandy Alligator Creek habitat. And most of these, as you'll notice, have orangey hindwings. This one species here, Orba, is a smaller species with black hindwings. On Sapelo Island, there are these two species. Now, this species is widespread in South Georgia, but this one was unique. I had never seen it anywhere before, and encountered it on Sapelo Island when we were doing a large survey on Sapelo Island. This one, which Paulette advertised the talk with, is actually from Brasstown Bald, and Brasstown Bald is our highest peak of all. And now, if you're wondering what the highest peak in Georgia is, it's about 4,850. So it's not super high, but you can get up to the parking lot up there near the top, and the parking lot's at 4,300 feet, and that's where this one came from. It is a more northern species, as you can see here, although there are coastal records for it in South Carolina. All right. So there's just a sampling of some underwing moths from other parts of the state. Now let's focus in on Taylor's Ridge. Well, in very northwest Georgia, you can see from this topographical map that we are in the region called the Ridge and Valley. And there are many parallel ridges running sort of at a southwest to northeast angle across this part of the state with valleys between them. None of these ridge lines are particularly high. The Taylor's Ridge is only 1,200 feet. Rocky Face Ridge Line, that's this one here. And here's where I work, by the way, and here's where my house is. Okay. This one, Rocky Face, is another one that's 1,200 feet. You go over here to Pigeon Mountain, it's a little taller, and you can see that there's also a bigger sort of massive here where this goes all the way up to Chickamauga, Chattanooga Military Park, and Rock City, if you've ever been in the Chattanooga area and heard of Rock City. And then you'll notice it extends on over here into Alabama too. There is one species I can mention, and I'll bring this up again later because there's another species that I'll show you that looks a lot like this one. There is this species of Catocala, which was species number 67 for the state. It feeds on a very distinctive species of shagbark hickory, which is found only here and about two other places like there and there. We will never see it on Taylor's Ridge because it's completely restricted to that food plant, and it's only been found here so far in the state. So there's a couple more I can get not very far from my house. So this gives you sort of the arrangement. Here's my house. There's Taylor's Ridge. Here's Rocky Face Ridgeline right next to where I work in Dalton. And so here we go. This is what it looks like from the satellite view. For a long time, this Forest Service Road 250 was open to the north, and you could go out here to this power line cut, and I'll mention this, a petroleum line cut, and I'll mention this petroleum line cut again later. But several years ago, the Forest Service put a gate on this road, so it's not open all the time. It is open some of the year, but it's not open all the year. And of course, I was used to having access all year long. And so I started collecting along. It's probably hard to see, but I started working this road here that goes off to the southwest. And there's another petroleum line cut right there. And this goes up to a house owned by a very nice gentleman called Larry Brooks. And he gave me permission to do any and all work I wanted to do along this road because some significant portion of this is a private drive of his. This is what it looks like going up that road. This is in early October. Here's the petroleum line cut looking uphill. Here's the petroleum line cut looking downhill and up to the next hump. There it is again with my car, same petroleum line cut. There are some other places there where there's a power line cut, and these cuts are always good because there's open habitat vegetation, which provides you with food plants for different species of moths than you'd find simply in the forest. And so that's part of what makes this a really diverse spot is the fact that it also has some of this open habitat with different kinds of plants in it. So, okay. The season, as I said, starts in May. One of the first ones we have out is a lovely species. It's called the scarlet underwing, and you can see why. Now, here's another one from Sapelo Island where I showed you the Delilah from earlier. And interestingly enough, there is a form as you go south that the inner line on the hindwing gets much, much thinner. And we just recently found the place where you can find both of these forms. So we found the place where these forms overlap in southeast central Georgia, if that's a real direction. Anyway, so this is the form we have here. This is the form down on the coastal plain. This one is one you don't see very often. And here you can see the, And here you can see the range map from Moth Photographers Group. And you'll notice that before the ones that I've taken in this area, there were basically no Georgia records at all. So that was a fun one to see. Here are 4 very small orange species. These 2 are the better ones. And again, if you look at the range maps, you can see virtually before I caught these, there were no records for that one and no records for that one. And so both of these are uncommon, but they occur on Taylor's Ridge. These other 2 are more common, and I put this one in. It's one of the most common species we have, but I put it in because many Catocala, many underwings have multiple forms, and this is a form you see repeated where there is sort of a dark basal 3/4 to the wing, and then there's this much lighter colored band on the outside of the wing. You'll see this again, like I said, just here in just a little bit.
Can I interrupt for just a moment?
Sure.
To go
Sure.
back? On that top row, it says it's, oopsie.
How far back?
No, just go forward now. Yeah, on the top row, it says Gisela form, and on the bottom row, are those the 2 on the top? Are they?
Actually, no. I don't have the regular form. I could have just put in endless pictures of all sorts of forms or of all sorts of species, and this would have taken 2 hours. And I decided not to do that. And so, but the regular form does look similar to this. Not quite the same pattern, but it's much lighter like that. So, but you'll notice this species has an entire loop on this inner band. This one does not. So that's one of the things that's kind of unique about this species is the inner band. And this one is Mira, as you can see
Okay,
here, Catocala Mira.
so
So
are there two species here or more than two
there are
species?
four. There are four. You'll notice it says Micronympha form Gisela. This one is Minuta.
Oh, got
This
it.
one is this one is Mira, and this one is Amestris. The four names are right down here.
Okay, I didn't parse that. Okay,
I
thank you.
realize I'm dashing. I realize I'm kind of dashing
Yeah.
through. I figure most people probably don't care about the scientific names of the southeastern species of underwings in Washington. I'm
Mhm.
just saying, especially if it's a butterfly group. But I wanted to show some of the diversity and just how pretty these moths are. And again, the underwing nature of these moths, of course, as well. So, all right. You move a little bit farther into the year, into June and early July, and these are two species that occur here. Now, when you saw some of those images earlier from Alligator Creek, um, those live images you saw were by a underwing specialist by the name of Bob Borth. Well, this species is a specialist on hawthorn, and it's apparently really, really hard to find, even though there are several records on the Moth Photographers Range Group, and of course that's my location right there. But he had a dickens of a time trying to find it, and I told him, "Well, come up in June." I said, "You'll probably see 8, 10 individuals," and he got there to Taylor's Ridge one in the June of 2024, and started looking around. He saw no hawthorn trees, and he says, "You made this up. We're never going to see it." And by the time he'd been there for 3 days, he saw 10 individuals. And so it's apparently really a good spot for them, even though apparently the food plant that it feeds on is hard to find on the ridgeline. But there are other hawthorn feeders as well on that ridgeline, so we know they're in there. It's just we don't see them, the trees, regularly. This is another one that's a little bigger, and I'm going to show you these two again with another species that's kind of similar with gray forewings and black hindwings later on, and show you just how tiny these guys are compared to this bigger one I'll show you later. Anyway, and here's the range maps for these two species. This is again Miranda, and this is one called Judith. Much more common, much more widespread, but still it doesn't get very far south. You'll notice on these range maps there's a lot where Georgia is either a fill-in or like about the furthest point south where these species occur. Okay. And again, we have many of these black hindwing species. A lot of the black hindwing species feed on hickories as opposed to hawthorns. And so we have a lot of hickory diversity here. And so we have a lot of these black hindwing species. This one is one that I had not seen before in North Georgia until COVID year. This was one I had not seen on Taylor's Ridge until COVID year, and it was only the second time I had seen it abundantly anywhere. And so that was kind of fun because here's the range map for this species. And again, you'll notice there's only one spot that looks farther south than Northwest Georgia. This was another one, and you'll notice this we're basically at the farthest point south for this species. And this was another one that, although I had seen it in Northeast Georgia, I'd never seen it in Northwest Georgia until that COVID year. So when I said, here's a nod to COVID-19, I really meant it, because I found a lot of species that year that I had literally not seen before on Taylor's Ridge or anywhere in Northwest Georgia. Here's another one of those species where I said the basal 3/4 of the wing is dark, and then it has this outer band. This one is quite a bit bigger than the Gisela form that Paulette mentioned earlier. And again, you'll notice, although there are records for farther south, that Georgia doesn't have many records. Now, this specimen actually came from my back porch, but the very first one I ever took in Georgia was on Taylor's Ridge. This is one of the black hindwing species that people really enjoy because the forewing is so strongly marked. This is Sappho. It's one that, and you'll notice I'm kind of advancing through the year here because now we're into mid-July. This one is found in mid-July on both Taylor's Ridge and even more commonly on Rocky Face Ridgeline. Same can be said for this one. It's found on both ridge lines, but more commonly on Rocky Face. But this is also one that occurs through the month of July. This one's considered relatively uncommon, but it is super common where I am here in Northwest Georgia. This one is flies from early July, and you'll notice it continues to fly all the way into mid to late October. Um, this one's called residua. It's called residua because the hindwing fringe is residual in the sense that it's not very visible because it's mostly dark. Well, it turns out, however, that where we live, there's a lot of this form where the fringe is not dark. And the genetics are being done on this right now, and it may be that the one with the dark fringe may actually be a different species than the one with the white fringe. Like I said, it's not totally confirmed yet. And again, you'll notice we're kind of at the southern end of the range here for this species residua. Yet another black species, and I mentioned some of the variability. There are 3 or 4 different black species where the forewings can either be just kind of solid gray, or they may have this big black bar through the middle of the wing. This one's Angusi, and you'll notice it flies from mid-August into mid-October. And again, we're kind of at the southern end of the range. This one, mid-August into late September. And again, very southern end of the range. 2020 was the first year I had ever seen it in my neck of the woods. And so there was another one that just showed up in the COVID year, even though I had been at home in August and September in other years. So that was kind of a surprise for me.
James, if we could just pause for a moment. I know
Sure.
you're stepping through the calendar, and so I'm sure that's helpful. But apart from the time of year that you see them, some of the differences between these black hindwing moths are very difficult to spot.
Very subtle. I agree with you completely. And I will say this, that for someone just starting out, there are more black hindwing species here than orange or red. Uh, and I will agree that there are a number that look more or less like this: gray forewings and black hindwings. And so if you are not trained, you sit here and go, he's just showing us the same one over and over and over again, just to try to boost his species numbers. Well, I promise you, they are different, but it does take some significant amount of time comparing them one to the other. And I know we're not all into specimens, but that's one place where specimens do make a difference, because they do allow you to look at the fine detail and the pattern on the wing. So even though there may be some variation, these two forms are pretty typical. And so you either get this form and nothing in between. And both this form and this form are subtly different from all the other black species that you can find here. So,
But James, what are some of the traits you use? It still
um,
seems like an act of faith.
I understand what you're saying, Bob, but you know how this line looks here, how the spots look on the wing, how this line looks here, whether or not it's fringed with brown or gray, the fringes on the hind wings, as I was talking about before, whether they're sort of a grayer or a whiter color, because all of that is somewhat different. The shapes of these bars, because I'm going to show you another one that looks, again, very similar to this one, where this is a little grayer. It doesn't have any of the brown in it, and where the bar is a different shape in the barred form. So I do understand what you're saying, but Bob, you should also know there are plenty of cryptic skippers and other things, Spieria out there, where I would argue that with Spieria, it's more an act of faith than it is with these guys. So that's just my opinion. So, but I think you would probably agree with it, Bob. So anyway. All right. These are a little bit more obvious. The patterning on the forewing is a little bit bolder. And for a long time, these were both thought to be individuals of the same species. But you can tell this one's sort of a gray overcast with a little bit of brown. This one is quite a bit yellower. And what's funny is that this one's called the yellow-gray underwing, although I'm betting that it was called the yellow-gray underwing because before these two were separated from one another, somebody probably looked at one of these and said, that's pretty yellow-gray. And so now the name yellow-gray underwing should apply to this species, even though that was the name originally given to this species. And what's funny is this one being relatively recently described, you'll notice there aren't a lot of dots all over the place, but in North Georgia, you'll notice Retecta. Here's the map for Retecta. That's this one. It basically drops out right about where I am. This one goes farther south, and it is really common where I am. So even though it's kind of a newly described thing, it's really widespread. And Betsy Betros took the 2 pictures on the opening slide, and those were in eastern Kansas. So it's really quite much more widespread than the map shows on Moth Photographers Group. They just need to catch up with the records here since it's been split. So, but this one also flies all the way into middle or late October. So. I mentioned gray one with a gray one, another one with a gray forewings and with a black bar. And like I said, this black bar, different shape than on the previous one. And this one is a smoother gray, and it's much bigger too. Sometimes size matters a lot. And I'll again show that to you here in just a second. And this is one that was confused with residua for a while. It was described quite some time ago, but this is only the second time I've seen Catocala obscura. And here you can see the range map, and you'll notice again, Northwest Georgia is definitely near the south end of the range of this species. And again, both this one is August, and the other one I saw was September. This one starts flying in August and goes all the way into November. So some of them fly very late in the year. Now, if you are tired of seeing black hindwing species, there are some others that are really spectacularly, wonderfully orange or red. And this is one of my absolute favorites. It's also a really big species. This one is nearly 4 inches in wingspan. And you'll notice it flies from late September into early November. And then I list some of the other species that also fly into November as well. So we can literally see 5 or 6 different species of underwings all the way into early November. So they have an impressively long season here, starting in May and ending in November. Now, I mentioned the ones with gray, just kind of slate gray forewings and black hindwings. This is the most recent one I showed you, 2 different individuals. And so you see they can be smaller, but they can also be quite a bit bigger. This is that Miranda I talked about that fed on hawthorn earlier in the year. And as you can see, it's much, much smaller. This wingspan here is probably not more than 2 inches. And this is Judith, which is sort of a medium-sized one. So that, again, when you ask the question, Bob, about how do you tell them apart, well, the size, of course, comes into play with some of them. So anyway, so here is the entire list that's from Taylor Ridge, and it ends right here. There are 2 more I've taken on Rocky Face Ridgeline, which is just 11 miles away. And so those 2 could easily be there. From within 30 miles, I've taken those 2 species, so they could also easily be there. A little less likely are these 2. That was the one that was on Brasstown Bald at much higher elevation. This is also tends to be a higher elevation one. This one I don't understand because it doesn't feed on anything spectacularly unusual. There are a few records that are scattered from around much of the state, but I've just personally never seen one myself in this area. So practically you could get the 47 I have recorded plus this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Would be at least potentially likely. So 52 species from one place. And as I said, Bob Borth, who came to visit me, indicated that 52 species in one place probably would set the record for diversity in one spot anywhere in the entire world. Now, there may be other spots along the southern Appalachians where it may be that diverse, and it might be even a species or 2 more, but it's certainly close to the highest diversity anywhere in the world, 30 miles from my house. This talks about a couple of the really unusual ones. Again, not a big deal for you guys in Washington, but we get some really specialty ones. The hawthorn feeders. I mentioned that we didn't find a lot of hawthorn trees when we were looking for the host plant for Miranda, but this one, and this one had also been taken on Taylor's Ridge, and so the hawthorns have to be there. There's even some amorpha, which have to be, and for those who don't know false indigo, it's a low-growing herbaceous plant, and so it's got to be in the petroleum line cuts. So again, the petroleum line cuts add some things to it. And then honey locust, which is all over the Midwest where I grew up, but it's pretty uncommon here. But clearly it's on the ridge too, because there are these 3 that feed on that. And then a wide variety of other trees that feed the various larvae of the underwing moths. The point being that Taylor's Ridge is not, of course, just richly diverse in underwings, but it has to be richly diverse in plants as well because of the diversity of underwings. Now, I promised Washington connections. Oh, Washington connections. You see the 2 here in this table with an asterisk. that one and that one. Well, those are the two of the 50 some species here. And that one right there, if it ever occurred on Taylor's Ridge, would also be ones that we share with Washington State. So there are a couple that are found both here and in Washington. One that you guys have that we don't, which is a special species, is the only species with white striped hind wings. And that's this species called the white underwing or the birch underwing. This picture here shows why it's called the birch underwing, because it, of course, is sitting on birch. And you can imagine if those four wings were closed, that it would blend beautifully into the background of the birch. This is also showing you some of the variation that you get in the four-wing coloration, like I've been talking about with some of the other species. So I figured I'd better show you this species because it's a special one and we don't get it in Georgia. You'll also notice that I list the number of species total from Washington. It's a lot less than what we have in Georgia. There are 15. But interestingly enough, you have absolutely no black hindwing species unless you want to call this one with a white band. 12 of them are red, which I actually like because the red hindwing ones, red is my favorite color, so I'm always into red. And 2 of them are with the orange hindwings. And like I said, none with black hindwings. Probably has to do with the fact that there aren't too many hickories in Washington, although somebody there knows better than I do whether there are hickories or not in Washington. So can anybody answer that question right now, if you don't mind? I'm assuming there are hickories. Are there hickories in Washington?
There are no hickories.
Okay.
There are no native members of the Juglandaceae in
Okay.
Washington.
Thank you, Bob. I knew you would know the answer, and I figured that was probably why there weren't any of the black hickory feeding species anywhere close to Washington. So,
Right.
Okay. Now, Taylor's Ridge is my go-to place when people come to visit. It's not just because of the underwings, although I think you would all agree that the underwings are really, really spectacular. But just like with the underwings, I'm going to run through just a few other species that we see there. Again, sequentially as you go through the year, there are a couple, the 2 on this slide that I'm showing you, that are already either flying or have flown. Both of these are still flying. This one is Feralia major, and whereas you don't have this species in Washington, it turns out you have more species in Washington than we do here in Georgia. There are 3 reasonably commonly occurring species in Washington, although one of them only occurs in eastern Washington, and there is a 4th species that just reaches the southwest corner of the state. So you guys have these around here, and probably the nicest looking one in the genus is one called Deceptiva, and that's right in your own backyard there in Washington. It's a lovely species, and it would be flying this time of year. So you should be looking out for it. Turn on a light and look out for a beautiful green noctuid like this. This, on the other hand, is a very bizarre looking geometrid moth. If you know what inchworm moths look like, they often have kind of broad wings and skinny bodies. Some people often say they're kind of like the butterflies of the moth world in the fact that they kind of have broad wings and skinny bodies like butterflies. This one is not a typical geometrid. This is one that I considered special when I came here, but after being here for 30 years, it's really quite common here. But I wanted to use this picture because you will notice the date. The date on this picture, I took this picture this morning at a gas station. So that one, although it's not from Taylor's Ridge, it is a very common moth on Taylor's Ridge. And although that green stands out, I should also point out, of course, that the green in the right circumstance is wonderful camouflage. This group of moths, the dagger moths, the Acronicta and related species, is a very diverse genus on Taylor's Ridge as well. And this is a genus where Washington rivals Georgia in terms of its diversity, or this subfamily, it rivals Georgia in terms of its diversity. And for that matter, you guys even have this species as well. So this one is another one we share. But I kind of threw up some of the more spectacular looking members of the Acronicta. These 3 are Acronicta, and these 2 are related to these guys. And just a nice group. And the most diversity, as I write here, is in the spring, in April. This is a very uncommon species. As you can see here, that dot basically represents this specimen. And on Taylor's Ridge, I've also taken this little lima-coated moth, which is brand new to science. The other members of the genus fly in midsummer, and this one flies in mid to late April and into very early May. So new things to be had on the ridgeline.
What family is the Hypema in?
The Hypena is in Erebidi, used to be Noctuidae. It's now Erebidi. So, and you have several species of Hypena in Washington, just not this species. This species, of course, is called Appalachiensis, and you can probably tell why just from looking at the distribution map. So, this is a lovely geometrid that occurs, as you'll notice, in a relatively restricted part of the Southeast. And Taylor's Ridge is the prime spot for this one. And it flies from very late April into late May. And, you know, this one shows the fact that you can have something that's gray and black and still be quite spectacular looking. Because I think it's spectacular looking. You guys may not, but I think it's pretty spectacular looking. Something for the pyralid people here or the crambid people here. This is a species that I had seen once before the COVID year. And in the COVID year and the year after, I found 6 individuals of this. And it's a big crambid. It's 2 to 2¼ inches in wingspan. This noctuid, who I found in middle June, and you'll notice there's another dot in middle North Georgia. This was the very first time in 2020. In 2024, I meant, just a couple years ago, that I have found that one on Taylor's Ridge. So that was also a fun thing for me because I only had seen 3 in Georgia before. Speaking of undescribed species, here is a species of Idia. It is 2 inches, if not bigger, in wingspan. I took this in the COVID year, and a day later or 2 days later, my colleague down in Statesboro, Georgia, took one that I thought looks pretty similar to it. And these both fall into something called the lubricalis complex. Now, the lubricalis complex includes a number of undescribed species because this is what typical lubricalis looks like. And I think you would agree that those two are quite different looking than that. Not to mention that these are, again, half as big as this one. Now, I did throw 2 others on here just to kind of expand the story a little bit. These, to me, kind of look maybe closest to this species, which is another large species, but it's called occidentalis, which tells you it's found in the western United States and in your own backyards right there in Washington State. And so I'm wondering if this one might be genetically closer to this than that. Now, there is one other species that deserves mention just because it's cool in Georgia, and that is this species that kind of looks a little bit like a washed out lupercalis, but this is gopheri, and it feeds on detritus in gopher tortoise burrows. You talk about a specialized habit, that's a specialized habit. This one is another noctuid that you'll notice is at the very southern end of its range here in northwest Georgia. I know it's not particularly spectacular, but I was very excited when I saw this one in the COVID year. I had seen one previously in Georgia, and these 3 all showed up in the COVID year. I had to show these just because the stereine noctuids are just wonderful to look at. These are the 4 species we have in Georgia, and they all occur on Taylor's Ridge. Unfortunately, you in Washington have 3 species in this group total. If you want to see lovely gold and orange and yellow stereines, go to Arizona in August and September, and you'll see a wide diversity of just lovely stereine noctuids. The genus Papipema is also not well represented in Washington, but this is one of our pretty ones that's quite common on Taylor's Ridge. And then to finish the year, and Papipema fly late in the year, you'll notice this is an October flyer. And then to finish the year off, this thing flies in mid to late November. This is our one buck moth we have here. Every now and then you can get these leucistic individuals. No, I don't think anybody's ever worked out any genetics on this, but they're kind of interesting looking. And I just finished getting the latest Lepidoptera Society news to the printer. And in it, I write an article on this where I show this phenogram, if you will, of the flight times that I have recorded starting in 1991 all the way to 2025 for the buck moth. Now, I will grant you that 95, 96, they flew pretty late in the year, and you'll notice that's November 27th. But for many years, starting at 2000 and going into the mid 2000 teens, the latest I was seeing it was probably the 20th, 21st of November. But in 2018, I saw them for the first time into December. And since then, not only do they seem to be flying perhaps a little later, but they also don't seem to be starting flight quite as early either. When I first came, I could go out on the 6th or the 7th of November and maybe see them. I could certainly count on seeing them by the 12th of November. But in the last several years, this is the only year I saw them as early as the 12th. And then these records are the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th of November for my first records. Now, I know you're looking at these two going, what about those? Well, I think there are opportunistic individuals that come out. These were not my records. This one was a student. This one was one captured in our newly introduced Joro spiders web. Okay. But I personally didn't see any in this time period at all. And I was checking, and I didn't see any in this time period at all at the same place, Taylor's Ridge, and I was checking. And so my non-scientific observation from looking at this is that perhaps the flight time is shifting a little later. Now, like I said, I didn't do any statistical analysis, so I can't say, definitively, but to me, it looks like maybe with a little climate change and it being warmer a little later in the year that we're getting this shift in phenology. So I thought I'd just share that story with you too while I had your attention. If you go to Taylor's Ridge, you are likely to be met by these two wonderful ladies. These are Larry Brooks's dogs, Flossie and Melinda. And I've often sent people to Taylor's Ridge, even when I'm not in town, and I say, just be aware there are dogs who will come and visit you. They are wonderfully pleasant and nice, and they will just look at you, and then they'll go off and do their own thing. So anyway, thank you for listening tonight. I don't think that took terribly long, so hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully you have some questions for me.
Yeah, Mark Schuler put a question in the chat. Mark, do you want to ask that question? And
Yeah, just go ahead and ask it. Yeah.
Mark? Okay, well, I can start. You have the maps, and we don't see any dots out in Washington. So I don't know if that's because the Washington species are cousins of the ones you're showing, or if they're the same. And the question is, if they are the same, is there a path that they follow from between Georgia and Washington, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, the maps I showed, as I said, there are 67 species in Georgia and only 15 in Washington. So there's not most of the species. Let me see. I think all of the species I showed were only eastern. The two that I showed on the table with the asterisks that I said were shared between Washington and Georgia, I didn't even show pictures of because they're common species and not unspectacular, but no more spectacular than the ones I did show you, because I didn't show you all 47 or 52 species that I could have. But one of the things you can do if you've never gone to Moth Photographers Group is you can go to Moth Photographers Groups and see those maps for yourself. And you can literally scroll through all the species of Catocala on Moth Photographers Group and see the maps, the distribution maps for all of them. And so you can see where they're distributed. And for those that are widespread, whether they're found across the southern United States or across the northern United States, because there's some that follow those paths in both cases. Because there are some that are found north of Georgia that I didn't show because I don't have them in Georgia. But they do go from, say, Maine across over to Washington. There are several species that do that sort of thing. And it's because they are northern species. So in all fairness, as far as ranges go, I'm not quite the farthest away from Washington you could get, but I'm pretty close. And so that's why we don't share too many species.
Yo, James.
Hey, John.
Hey, how you doing, man? Hey, I got to tell you that the Cranbrook and Pine Valley people that normally are here, they all ascended directly to heaven. We don't have any. Barentine is as close as we get.
Yeah. You do have some crambids and you do have some pyralids out there. I promise you. They may not be as big and showy as that one. And I did, of course, pick that one because as crambids go, that one's pretty spectacular.
Oh, we got lots of crambids and pyralids. We don't have anybody looking at them.
Right. I understand that. So, well, if there's a Lepsock meeting out that direction anytime soon, I will probably drag Brian Schultens with me. He's been doing that in recent years. He says, I ask him when we go to these meetings, it's like, I know you'd like to tag along. Do you want to have any input? He goes, no, you make the path and I'll just follow. He's a big moocher is what he is. So, and he'll just grab all these micros that he can. And he's been finding wonderful stuff on these trips we've been taking. So,
and we love reading your trip reports, James.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, he and I, hopefully you enjoyed the Lepsock News articles on James and Brian's excellent adventure to Montana.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, there's another set coming.
Reports.
There's another set coming on the trip we took to Arizona and back last year.
Good.
It'll start probably this summer or this fall. So,
James, I just want to say that you're a lucky man to have this emanation of the natural world that you love so much and know a lot about, to be so diverse near your home. I'm immensely envious of that.
Yeah.
And the only single thing that you can be envious of me about in that respect is that I do get Catocala relicta here.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
The big white birch.
Yeah.
And I wrote a little essay about it as a birch mimic, and I've only had it twice in 40 years, but still I have hopes for more. But what a gorgeous moth it is.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. Now, you say you're envious of me. Well, I will point out that for many, many butterfly groups, the East is just depauperate compared to the West.
Yeah,
for instance,
pretty well with swallowtails.
We don't care with swallowtails, but I'm a lycaenid guy, and so when as butterflies go, and so when you talk blues, we got nothing compared to what you have out west. It's like, well, I go out, I catch the 4 species I could catch it. That's it. I'm done for the year. And I can go to South Georgia and catch a couple more that occur in Florida and get over into South Georgia. But there's hardly any diversity here. And certainly, I mentioned the Spiraea, our genus. I'm not sure what people use there, but compared to here we have nothing other than one really special one, which is Diana.
Yeah, which can be about 3 feet across.
Yes, exactly.
And your Sibiles, even your Great Spangolds, they're
big,
twice the size of ours.
Yeah,
and your wood nymphs too. Your wood nymphs are literally twice the size of ours.
Yeah, it's true because
they're fantastic.
Yep, the Pagala is a fun one because that, of course, does occur here and in Washington, but certainly not the same subspecies, and ours are quite a bit different looking. So
I wanted to ask you though, and Dana, I'll ask you at the same time. You showed a beautiful pink Papapima.
Yes.
And then you showed yet a slide on the right of a really good night with Papapima.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how many species were in that.
But there were 4 species of paps in there, and they all fly late.
Well, people don't know these moths. They're awfully pretty. They're colored and patterned kind of like the ghost moths, but their larvae burrow in particular kinds of rootstocks. And some are in ferns, is that right? Some in grasses and so on, like ghost moths, so they're not closely related. But I wondered how many species of paps where you are, and Dana, how many do we have out here?
Oh boy, you put me on the spot here. Hi, everybody. I know that we have a handful. I'm going to say, 3, 4, 5 max, maybe.
Yeah.
But depending how.
Yep, Dana's directly on target. That's another group, I will admit, that we're lucky in the East. There's not too many groups I can say that about, but Catocala and Papapima both are groups we're lucky with in the East because I came to Georgia, and when I first did a quick survey of some of the collections around the state, I was getting like 4 or 5 species total for the state. Well, since I've been here, the total for the state is now 27. So.
And I remember when Dale Schweitzer was collection manager at Yale, and it was the same deal. He was in hog heaven because there he was in the Northeast as being the Papapima lover, and there were paps all over the place. I mean,
Yeah.
I heard more about paps from Dale than any other subject for those years, but
Yeah. Well, for anybody who are interested in that group of moths, that was that pretty reddish pink one with the white spots on the forewings. That fascicle of the moths of North America has just been published. I mean, just been published. You can literally get, and most of the fascicles are now free for electronic download. You don't even have to buy them anymore. You can go to the Wedge Foundation website, and that'll take you to where the whole series is available, if they're still available. And almost every single one is available now as an electronic download.
that's
Just
great.
so you
Who
know.
wrote the Papapima one? Was it Dale?
It was Tony McBride, who most people probably don't know, but it was also Eric Quinter.
Oh, Eric.
And it was published posthumously for Eric. They got through the manuscript before he passed in June of 2024. And I was one of the reviewers, and I got a request from Chris Schmidt at the Canadian National Collection to review the manuscript, but he wanted the entire manuscript, the entire book, reviewed in 3 weeks. And I was going, and thankfully, it was a time of year that was sort of transitional for me between spring and summer semester. So I kind of had a couple free weeks, and I said, okay, I'll do it. And he didn't explicitly tell me why, but I sort of divined why, and it was because Eric was not in good health.
Oh.
And so what they wanted was for the reviews to be done and for the reviews to come back so Eric could possibly see, in its the fascicle in its final form. And unfortunately, he never did, because he passed away literally, just a couple weeks after I finished my review. But anyway, but it's a lovely book and has Eric's fingerprints all over it, and Tony has done a wonderful job of putting the finishing touches on it. So I recommend it to anybody. And it's, like I said, it's one of the most lovely fascicles there is, because the Papapima are just lovely to look at.
So there are a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, sorry, we got sidetracked.
That's no, quite all right. Everybody's free to unmute and chime in. So RJ,
please do.
If you want to unmute, that's great. I'll start your question and feel free to add to it. So could the Catocala be hilltopping like butterflies? Could that account for some of the diversity and the lack of finding the host plants?
That is a really fantastic question, because although it's not something I think of a lot with moths, I will say that I've also trapped in some of the ravines around here, and I certainly don't get quite the diversity that I do on the hilltops. And that Marmorata, that big, lovely red one near the beginning that you used to advertise my talk, when I went to Brasstown Bald, I actually took some Lepidopterus who were visiting from Arizona, and I had never taken Marmorata in Georgia, and I set one of them up at the parking lot at the top of Brasstown Bald, and I set another one up at a different elevation. I set another one up at a different elevation, so they would get different moths at different places and share. And I came back to the top, and my friend had caught one of these Marmorata, and I was just like drooling and salivating and all this because I'd never seen one in Georgia. And so I kind of sat up there with him, and Marmorata, he had his bright light on, and the Marmorata comes in from way up in the sky. So, and they feed on cottonwoods, and there are no cottonwoods up on high elevation peaks in Georgia. So there's no doubt that there are some species that are hilltopping. And so I, again, think that's an excellent idea as to why we see a bunch up there and not necessarily the food plants right next door to where we're setting up our lights. So yes, I believe that's happening.
Okay, great. RJ, if you want to add anything or comment, that's great. Oh, he says his mic is broken. So if you have additional questions, or if you didn't get it answered by what I was directing James toward, please put it in the chat, and I will convey your thoughts. So Patricia, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have one more thing I'd like to share, and that is, have people baited before? Anybody here baited before? Baited?
Yes.
Anybody? Okay,
Yes.
because if you've baited and you've baited for butterflies, it's probably true for butterflies as well as moths. But I wanted to make this point. I've always found that the bait works better in places that are drier. And the reason I say that is because places that are wetter, you tend to have other resources that are readily available that the butterflies use. I definitely find that with Catocala, because I had a Catocala guy visit me all the way back in 1991 and says, I had the best bait. I'm going to catch all these Catocala. And he put out, I said, go right ahead. And he put out 2 bait traps. And I said, now I'm going to take you on my loop of lights at gas stations that I do, because at the time I didn't have any regular sheets or any generators or anything like that. And so we did this loop of gas stations with him, and we caught 17 species of underwings that one night. So it was a really good night. And we went and picked up his traps in the morning, and he had a grand total of 2, 1 in each trap. And so I said, I told you, bait just doesn't work well here in the Southeast. And so
it doesn't work very well in Colorado either, at least not in my experience. My mother and I used to try to, James, you and I both share that our mothers were collecting partners of ours. And my mom and I used to bait with, there was a wonderful cherry cider made in Lyons, Colorado. And out of real cherries. It wasn't just apple juice with a few cherries. It was really rich stuff. And I used it for the basis of a bait concoction with the sour beer and everything else, the sugar and molasses. But we tried to do it in the coniferous forests of the Front Range of Colorado, and we got some moths, army cutworms, and a few other things, but we never did get a single Catocala. But when I went down and did it in the cottonwood trees down on the Highland Canal on the plains, we at least got Cara and a couple other species.
Yes.
But not very much. But I want to tell you, in terms of baiting, if people don't know, and James, I know, was as much in love with this piece of writing as I am. I know Jonathan is too. But one of the loveliest pieces of American, almost late Victorian natural history writing is by William Jacob Holland,
absolutely,
author of both the Butterfly book and the Moth book. And he interspersed his species accounts with little essays. That's where I got the idea for Cascadia. And so in the Moth book, one of his essays is called Sugaring for Moths. It's about an older person, or at least an adult anyway, going on, an expert at doing this, going on taking a young mentee of some sort along with a little protege and telling him what's going on all the way along. And now we will daub this trunk and come back later, and then they go back waiting for the storm to rise. Time for a good Havana on the porch. And then they go out just before the storm breaks with their lanterns, of course.
Lanterns, absolutely.
And I always remember, you remember this, James, where he says, "Oh ho, my beauty!"
Yes.
I picture you doing that over and over on your ridge. "Oh ho, my beauty!"
Yeah, something like that.
But you want to look that
up. I probably haven't said "Oh ho, my beauty," but I've said things similar.
But people want to look that up. It's Sugaring for Moths from W.J. Holland. I am sure you find it on the internet.
Yeah, it's a lovely little piece. It really is. And for that matter, it's cool because he also references the storms in the plain states, and the fact that really humid nights are really good for moths. And so anyway, it's a fun little piece.
Okay, Patricia.
I think
go ahead.
Oh, just really briefly, I remember Nabokov had a poem about his bait recipe, slathering it on a tree in that collection.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
I remember that piece as well. It's fun. Yeah, I guarantee you there's lots of little stories like that from many authors out there. But you're right, the Holland one was really personable. So it was good. All right. So, somebody else had a question?
Yeah, Patricia, I don't know if you're on. If you want to ask, I'll go ahead and start if you want to chime in. Are the moth larvae are they prone to viruses?
Depends on the group. Because I've done a lot of rearing in my lifetime, as many of you probably have had as well. And you probably know that Some are pretty easy to get through, and others are really difficult to get through. And so some appear to require very specific circumstances to get through without getting a virus of some kind. But I will tell you this, you want to rear stuff and be successful, do tiger moths, because tiger moths, the woolly bears, I mean, as adults, I mean, they're pharmacologically rich in terms of what they eat and in terms of what they store in their body. And I honestly believe that not only do the mixed function oxidases in their gut help them tolerate all these chemicals, but by incorporating those chemicals, they're also basically antibioticizing their body, if you will. It's not a word, but you know what I'm saying is they're protecting themselves not just from predators, but from the little critters out there as well. And so they do very well. As far as Catocala go, I honestly have not reared many Catocala. The few larvae that I've encountered almost all the way to adulthood, and so I've never had a problem getting them through. I know Jeff Slotton and some others have reared a number of Catocala, and again, they find that it's variable. It depends on the species. Some are pretty easy to get through, and others are really, really difficult to get through without getting a virus. And for those that are difficult to get through, and if you do rearing of the same species multiple times, you'll find out which ones are easy and which ones are hard. Sleeving the larvae on the natural food plant is probably the best way to go instead of trying to rear them in containers or anything like that. Most of the time when I rear things in containers, I do rear things in containers most of the time. I'm not... I'm too lazy to go out and sleeve things on trees very often, but my containers are almost always open on the top in the sense that they have a mesh over them so that they don't get over humidified. And because the wetter it is in the environment the larvae grow in, the more likely they are to get an infection of some kind.
Hey, James, the first Catocala larva I ever found, I found quite by accident. I was going along a branch, and looking for, I think, some other things. But of course, they line up on the branches and they're almost camouflaged. So, I just had to turn around and bid me. Hey. Well, I was like 14,
Yeah. Well,
I was tender.
A lot of people think larvae don't do anything to human beings. I'd mentioned rearing a whole bunch of tiger moths. I had a tiger moth get loose in a relatively mature larvae get loose in the house I want to say October and November, and I didn't see it. And I thought, well, it just crawled off in a corner and dried up and died somewhere. And like a month and a half later, there it is crawling across the floor. And of course, outside, it would have been cold. Its metabolism would have been slowed down, so it probably wouldn't have needed much food. Well, I picked it up, and it bit the crap out of me, too. So I've been there with you, John. It was like, I need food. So yes, caterpillars do bite sometimes. So.
Yeah, or sting. You don't want to lose
absolutely.
You don't want to lose a lima-coated in your house. And
no.
Have a saddlebag caterpillar turn up in your shorts or something.
Well, I have two stories along those lines, if I may. One, I reared Io moth caterpillars one year. They have very nice stinging spines, as do the buck moths. The very last moth I showed you has stinging caterpillars. And one of them got loose in the house, and I didn't realize that I was walking around barefoot. Oh. And so I stepped on it and got a very nice burning sensation at the bottom of my foot. But you mentioned the saddleback caterpillar. Well, one time when I was in Mexico, I came across this batch of larvae that I knew were lima-coateds, but they didn't immediately have any noticeable dehiscing spines of any kind. And so I went to I carried them along with me, basically in a garbage bag, and would I carefully looked at the food plant to see what it was. And so as I traveled, I kept grabbing little bits and pieces of this food plant. Luckily, it was easy to find. And so this one day I went to change them. And so I was moving the larvae, and I literally picked up the larvae, moved them over here, and dumped the poop, put new plants in, and then put the larvae back in with the plants. They were easy to do that with. And then I scratched the inside of my nose, and I found out that they had these little dehiscing spines that I didn't see. And I spent the next 2 hours with my finger up my nose in pain because it's like, oh God, I got to stop the burning. It was unpleasant.
It's like when you try to eat a prickly pear fruit without cleaning off all of the
all the glochids. Yeah,
glochids. That's the word. Yeah.
Yeah, it's true.
So as far as the larvae go and raising them, I think you mentioned, I just wanted to clarify that you don't tend to find that at the genus level, a particular genus is difficult to raise. You find it at the species levels within a genus. Some are easier than others to raise. Is that right?
Again, it depends on which group we're talking about, because across the Catocala, it's quite variable. Across tiger moths in general, however, and that's multiple genera, and not necessarily the entire family, but multiple genera in tiger moths, really easy. Okay, in general. So it depends on which group you're looking at, because it can be quite variable. So,
Whereas the satyrs, the satyrines, the browns and ringlets and alpines and arctics, they're uniformly hard. Well, a couple of exceptions, but the ringlets aren't as bad, but they can be very, very difficult to get through. And of course, a lot of them are biennial, which makes it.
right.
I tried to
Yeah.
write the Valerata Arctic from the Olympics as part of my doctoral research back in '75, and I had the climate controlled chambers at Yale at my disposal, and I got them through the first winter. All right. And the second winter, they were starting in and they were getting awfully close to pupation and they got mold in their butt. Now, but they do that over and over and over.
Yeah.
Hard to rear.
Yeah, those things that have to overwinter partway through the larval stage, you have to have the right humidity and the right temperature. And I've had so many times where I've tried to get larvae through, and they just end up these desiccated, poor little things, and it's just sad. So,
So
I saw Elizabeth ask about the books.
yes.
They're called the Moths of North America series, Moths of North America fascicles. And like I said, and the website to go to find them is called the Wedge, WEDGE Foundation. You go to the Wedge Entomological Research Foundation website, and you will find those fascicles there.
If you do Moths of North America and Wedge as search terms, you'll get that.
Or even MONA and Wedge.
Yeah. You're right.
And James, is the Catocala fascicle still pretty good?
Yeah, I laugh partly to protect my own feelings about this as anything, but Larry Gall has been working on the Catocala fascicle for just about as long as fascicles have been being published.
Yeah.
And in all fairness, he's got most of the information. He has a website where he's got most of the distribution maps he's going to use in the fascicle on the website. And it's one of those things where I keep feeling like he's waiting to get absolutely all the information he can, and every single species he can get described. And it's like, if you do that, you'll never publish.
Yeah.
And he's not old enough. He's to a point where he's going to, I just throw up his hands and go, it's never going to happen because I'm going to be dead soon. He's not that old yet. And so it's kind of like, every now and then I go, Larry, where are we? Larry, where are we? That kind of thing. And so it's still there. It's not the next fascicle that's going to be published. So I don't have any more news than that. So, of course, you could say the same thing about the Arctiine fascicle. I don't know if you remember, but when the Mona was first advertised, it was a plate of tiger moths back in 1969.
I remember that.
Plate of tiger moths. And Chris Schmidt is working on those. They're not around the corner, but I think they're probably closer than the Catocala one, to tell you the truth. But the tiger moths are going to take 3 fascicles to do, not just one. So
there's a question I want to go back to your article that you just published about the phenology, and it's asking about global warming, and
yeah.
I guess to even elaborate on that, and please chime in, Stuart, as well if you have additional questions or want to speak, is you show I think it's Catocala, but I guess I was wondering if you have information on phenology for other species, whether you can pretty clearly link it to global climate change, or if it's related to some other phenomena.
Yeah,
and Stuart, please chime in.
It's interesting you say that. I haven't, like, the buck moths are one of those that I've been able to kind of track, because you really can go out during the daytime and kind of figure out more or less almost the day they start flying. I mean, it's one of those things that you can really go out and survey. With a lot of moths, I can't get out during the week, and so I have weekend windows. And so sometimes it's hard to track precisely, and it really takes almost daily sampling to get the kind of information you would need to know for sure. Now, there is, however, another way you can get at it. And we were talking about the Papipima moths earlier, and I gave a talk about 15 years ago on Papipima. And one of the cool things about Papipima is, if you look at the many species across their distribution, and there are many, many species that occur in Georgia, but also occur all the way in southern Canada. And if you look at the flight times as you go from southern Canada, of course, down to where I am, it's later and later in the year the farther south you go. Okay. And so the fact that it's later and later and later in the year the farther south you go would definitely suggest that if it's warmer later in the year, that's when they fly. And so it's not a direct evidence of climate change affecting it, but it does show you that climate clearly does control, to at least an extent, the flight time of particularly early spring and late fall things. Not as much in the summer, because if you compare our phenology here in the South to the phenology, say, in Canada, those early spring moths, the things I have out now, they'll be out in May in southern Canada. And the late fall things I have in October, November will be out in August, early September in Canada. And so in essence, we start earlier and end later. And so after the middle of the summer, our things are flying later, but before the middle of the summer, our things are flying earlier, if that makes any sense. Hopefully that does.
Makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. I have a question. I was wondering, I mean, the whole idea of insects hearing, it seems like it must be, I don't know if you can explain readily, what that mechanism is, but clearly it's not exactly like mammals. And so it just seems so extraordinary.
Yeah, not exactly like mammals, but surprisingly not terribly different from mammals either. I should also say that an insect ear has evolved multiple times in multiple groups of insects, and it's even evolved multiple times in Lepidoptera, because the hearing organs are in different places on different parts of the body in different moths and butterflies. So, and what it typically is, it is simpler than the mammal ear, but your basic hearing mechanism is a membrane that feeds into a set of bones that gets some fluid moving, that then bends some hair-like structures that bends nerve endings, and off to your brain goes the hearing information. For the insects, it's a lot simpler, but they have a membrane. For them, they just sort of bypass all the stuff in the middle, and they have the membrane and then literally nerve endings right on the membrane, so that when the membrane vibrates, the little nerve endings get bent and the hearing information goes off to the brain. So,
isn't it called a tympanum, James?
Called a tympanum.
So, James, were you in the Bakersfield when those students did that presentation where they showed the flighting of the moths and the bats, and the way the bats responded to the clicking that the moths made?
I was not at Bakersfield, but I've seen that many times. I've even worked with Bill Connor a little bit. In his lab, and everybody who, of course, has graduated from his lab, because Bill's getting kind of old now and he's not doing as much, but a lot of his descendants, his student descendants, are still working on that system. And yeah, it's really cool, because the tiger moths take it one step further. They not only hear, and I mentioned this in my tropics talk 2 years ago or whenever I gave that talk, but tiger moths, their ear has neurons that literally go straight from the ear to the timbal organ, which is the part that makes the sound. And so what happens is it's an immediate reflex. It doesn't even go to the brain and back, because a lot of your reflexes, the information goes from the receptors to your brain and then back out to whatever it needs to move. In this case, it's straight from the ear to the timbal organ, because the timbal organ is right next to the ear. And the muscles that run the timbal organ are immediately stimulated by the bat sound. And so it's an automatic reflexive response to the bat sound.
And the sound that they make actually confuses the bats.
Some people say it jams bats. I believe that it probably does for some species, but if you're telling me that one type of sound that one tiger moth makes in the tropics where you've got 50 different bat species is going to jam every bat species, I don't believe it, because the sound characteristics can't possibly do that for all bat species. I personally think for many species, all it is like bright color during the day. It is a warning sound that I taste bad because bright color doesn't work at night. So,
well, I don't know, James. I don't know, because one stick of dynamite has pretty much the same effect around the world.
Yeah.
It might also have a blunt, not jamming the echo detection, but just confusing it, making a more
Yes,
complex
surprise.
auditory
Yep.
background. But the
Yep.
other thing, if you remember too, John, in those experiments, there's the even greater escalation in the battle, and those are the tiger moths that not only have the tympanum pick up the sounds, have the timbal make the resultant sounds, but then if the bat still gets too close, they blast the bat in the face with a big burst of downy scales of what are those scales called? I forget. But it's like
I don't remember. I always think of them as dehissing scales, but that's not what they're
de-hissing
called.
scales, and the bats get this massive blast of white puff in their face.
Yeah.
If the sounds weren't enough. I mean, they're pretty cool.
And what's also cool is that the muscles that run the timbal organ are actually formerly part of the wing musculature. And so not only do they produce the sound automatically, but there are also neurons that go straight to the wing muscles, so that if it's flying along this way and it hits this ear, it makes this wing flap faster than this one automatically, and it goes into a nosedive, a spin. And so it automatically escapes as well. So it's just really cool.
Yeah, I used to think that when a bat was after a moth, it was pretty much locked on, like Top Gun. It's not that way. When I really got that brainstorm, which wasn't original or anything, was at Timberline Lodge at Mount Hood with great big overhead lights. And I was out there watching the bats and the moths. There were a lot of moths and there were a lot of bats. And the bats missed in my little sample right then and there about 7 out of 10 times. Moth would evade the bat. They didn't connect every time at all. So it's very different from how I had imagined it.
Yeah. Although I will admit there have been times where I've been by a light sheet and down from above come these wings like this. And it's like, well, that was a really good species. Too bad, you know.
Exactly.
So Allison, do you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to add to the conversation that there are some bats, such as Townsend's big-eared bat, which uses mostly moths as prey, that is adapted by having a quieter sonar or quieter voice, so that the moths can't hear it as well. And if you go out with your, the thing you can buy to add to your phone to try to identify bats, you can't pick them up.
Well, and the fact that they are the big-eared bat, that makes sense because they can pick up their own sound better. It's also true that there are some that have shifted their sonar into a higher range. So they're calling it 60 or 70,000 hertz or 80,000 hertz instead of 40 or 50. And so, some tiger moths can't pick that up. So it's a really cool world.
Maybe not yet.
The batty moth world. I told Paulette that I'll have to resurrect my dissertation talk at some point because this was something I covered in detail in my dissertation. So, but that was many decades ago.
So has there been more research on this topic?
Well, yes, yeah. This was what John and I were talking about Bill Connor and his student descendants. There's a lot of research going on this, and I kind of stay on top of it. And it's all very interesting. I mean, I'm big into defenses of Lepidoptera against predators. It's a cool thing because, like Bob was saying, our view of the world is, it's everything eats insects world. And the insects are these poor little things that just produce humongous numbers in the hopes that some of them will hang on and continue the races. But that it's very different from that. It's an arms race where the moths and butterflies are much better protected than we're largely aware of. So.
Well, it seems like a very, very useful adaptation. It would be interesting to trace the different ways that the hearing has popped up and the different, I mean, it's the same effect, but presumably different locations in the body, different mechanisms slightly. Yeah, that sounds like a very interesting talk.
What's interesting is it's a surprisingly similar structure wherever it's popped up. It's a relatively simple ear, and so it's a membrane over some nerve endings almost everywhere, whether it's on a leg or there's even a group of the sphingids can hear, where is it? Somewhere on the abdomen. Most noctuids here on the thorax. And like I said, I think katydids here off the...
They can be in any segment on the thorax, too.
It can be. It can be. And that's... Again, we know it's evolved many, many times, and katydids here on the legs, and anyway, it's evolved over and over and over again. But it's a pretty simple ear, so
it's interesting. You mentioned the differences in the frequencies, and so I mean that alone is interesting. That presumably there are some differences in the actual tympanum itself that causes that difference in the range of.
Well, just like you hear within a certain range, everything hears within a certain range, because you get too low and your own tympanic membrane, your own eardrum will not vibrate, and you get too high and your own tympanic membrane will not vibrate at that frequency either. Mm-hmm. And so just like that, like you said, every tympanum is going to have a range in which you can hear, and you can't hear across all the way from, near 0 hertz all the way up to 200,000 hertz or something like that, because human hearing range, and mine's shorter than that, I'm sure, since I'm old, is usually about 20 to 20,000 hertz. So
it's kind of like getting them good vibrations, right?
Good vibrations.
Sorry.
It's all right. We appreciate you anyway, John.
Anyway.
Okay, are there any other questions or comments? Okay, well, this has been a very, very interesting presentation. So thank you so much, James.
Yeah, thanks, James.
Yet another great one, James.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. Paulette, I gave you a whole list. So, if a year and a half or two from now, or even sooner, you want to have me come back and do another one, I'm more than happy to do so.
And I can't wait for the news in my mailbox. It's always wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah,
I take some pride in that, I will admit. So
you should. They call it the news, and it's like people say newsletter, but it's one of the most beautiful entomological magazines in the world, and informative and fun.
Well, and that's the thing, it is a newsletter, but the stuff I get, I think, is always pretty amazing, because I get some very nice folksy types of articles, but even those are fun to put together and read. And then I get some stuff that's surprisingly scientifically sound, and it's just amazing what I get for the news, and I never run out of material. So I really appreciate my contributors all the time.
Well, Melanie Weiss is here tonight, and she's the one that got down in the dirt to take pictures of those Fritz in the dirt, man.
Yep.
I ain't never gonna get over that one.
Yeah. That article was a fun one, and I was thinking she's pretty go-getter to go out that late in the year too. When you normally don't think there's going to be hardly any spirea around, and so
be crawling around in the dirt the way she was too.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's. I go back every year. It's just a great place.
Can you just talk a little bit about it? I don't know if everybody knows what we're talking about, Melanie.
So in the fall, I'm sure in the fall, the coronas return from nectaring high in the mountains, and they come back to the shrub steppe, and they feed on whatever is left blooming, which is
rabbit brush
in huge quantities. And then the females go about dropping eggs on it looks like they're just dropping them in grass, on dirt. I've taken pictures where it's just fascinating to watch, and they'll they'll drop an egg and then they'll fly a little ways and drop another one. And then they'll kind of come down to one area and say, this one doesn't seem quite good enough. And then they'll fly further on. And the sense is that they're picking up the violets,
chemical cues.
Yes.
Well, you see the roots on those violets. They're bigger than the plant, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so.
that's true wherever the spy area are. I've seen some Diana females can be flying
They do the same thing. Yeah.
As late as October. I mean, they're out in October and there's nothing left on the ground, and they'll just go lay eggs on the ground, what few they have left. And yeah. But somehow they're sensing where the violets are going to come up the next year.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Hey, later, James. Take it there.
Yeah. Thank you so much, people. It's always a pleasure.
Okay. Just one last thing. I want to mention that our talk next month will be by Zach McDonald, Dr. Zach McDonald, who just started his professorship at UC Riverside. And he'll be talking about some work he did up in Canada on the, let's see, it's a hair streak, the curiously isolated hair streak.
Yes.
A new species. So we're looking forward to that next month. And I hope you'll join us as well, James.
If I register and then remember the night of the talk, I will join you, because that's happened several times where I've registered. Wednesday night rolls around, it's 9:30, and it's getting close to my bedtime, and I just forget about the dang talk. I feel so bad about it.
Paulette, if I can just mention, I hope it won't be too long until David James can give us a talk on the new, or someone on the new Monarch devices.
That will be in May.
And if people haven't yet seen,
it'll be May. Excellent.
Oh, good, because people haven't yet seen some of the videos, the real-time videos, while they're accelerated, showing detection by detection by detection of all these parallel lines of monarchs going down. It's it's what people dreamt about for decades.
Do you want to give a little more information about that, Bob? Because I'm not sure everybody knows exactly what you're talking about.
Well, these are it's the long imagined dream of having transmitters on monarchs. However, it's different from what was always imagined, which was that they would be satellite-based transmitters that would transmit information that would be picked up by satellite and be sent out to detecting units, as you do with wolves or caribou or anything else with a transmitter on it. But no, they're too heavy. So Mark Garland, who had worked on monarch tagging for decades on Cape May, suggested to a company that was making very lightweight transmitters, well, maybe you could even make one that worked with monarchs. And in 3 years after he said that, they have now released those. But the way they're picked up is that their beam is detectable passively by any cell phone.
Yep.
Don't even have to have the app. So anybody with a cell phone can pick up the pips from monarchs passing by if they're within, I don't know, what is it?
It's a little less than a mile, so you got to be pretty close. But the reason I know that is because there's a one-pager in the next news about that as well.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Well, it's pretty amazing. I saw the first, Mark Garland called me last week, and he sent me one of these, he sent me a link for one of the videos of this actually happening. I mean, it's speeded up from real time, but it's truly amazing. The amount of information that's being generated so fast, and the surprises that are coming, like a monarch that got off course and went to the Bahamas and then reoriented and came back to Georgia or something, and then on down to Mexico. I mean, there are things people never even imagined going on with monarchs. So that'll be cool to watch.
Yeah, so David will be speaking about that in May. Those will be our next two presentations. I just want to give a heads up. I know David will speak about this, but each of the little transmitters costs, I think, $200. And so there's a fundraising effort to try to tag as many monarchs as possible. And WBA has contributed, Regina, is it 6 tags?
I think it was 6. Yeah,
Seven.
Seven.
It's because Jim Reed was doing a 7th one.
Okay.
That's great.
Okay, and I know a lot of our members have purchased them directly. Is there information on our website about purchasing those transmitters by individuals?
I know that Liz posted an article by David, so I imagine there's some information in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So oh, go ahead.
We provided that information for the news as well. So
Okay.
if you get the Lepidopterist Society newsletter, it's in there as well, where you can go to.
This project is David's from Idaho, and
Yes.
there's a
Yes.
link directly on the website connected to his article.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Liz. I just wanted to get, if people are interested, you can name your monarch, you buy the transmitter and name it and you can follow it. And so it's, as Bob is saying, it's really, really an incredibly exciting development. And so I'm sure he'll be talking about it and encouraging people to purchase them as well. So those will be our last 2 talks for, we're going to, for this spring, we'll have the field season through the summer, and then we'll start again in September with our talks again.
I was just going to say that the company that makes them has donated a bunch of them
Yes.
to be used in Mexico. So they're tagging a bunch in Mexico now, getting ready for the departure. That's going to be pretty exciting too.
I foresee a new hobby or maybe planning an exhibition for collecting these end of life, specimens that have these transmitters attached. That could be interesting to start planning for.
Good point, Michael.
Let's just hope that somebody doesn't try to make a buck by short circuiting their flight. So.
Oh, dear.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to get morbid on anybody. But.
Wow.
Well, it will be interesting to see if they are attached to different generations and which ones end up, the final northern one or somewhere in the middle. Or that's so cool.
Yeah, it is. It's very cool.
When you said video, Rob, are you talking about like a map you saw, like with the data?
Yeah, where you watch.
Okay.
Yeah, where the data fills in. Yeah,
cool.
Okay, well, let's see. Wade is saying, do you want to unmute, Wade? There's that's right. There's there are various videos about this technology. Yes. Wade is saying that in Spokane there was a library presentation on the new technology. So
yeah, there might be some information there, but there's no way to view the presentation that was given.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much, James. It's always a pleasure to see you. And very, very nice presentation. People have really enjoyed it. So thank you very much. And we'll see you all next month on, I think it's April 1st.
Sounds good.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks, James.
Thank you, James. Yeah, you're welcome.
Bye.
If I can get more interested in moths, the better. So,
wow, there's a lot of people here tonight, so I think you're doing
good.
Sleep tight, don't let the bed bugs bite.
Indeed.
Good night, everyone. See you.
Good night.
Good night.